Good morning, Gerald. How are you?
Doing well, Randy.
I guess it's afternoon now, isn't it?
Yeah. We ate lunch, didn't we?
We did. We did.
Unless you're eating hot dogs for breakfast.
Not typically. Good morning or good afternoon again. I wanted to welcome you to my next installment of Legends of the Steel Pipe Business, a program that I've been working on for the last couple of years.
Well, if it's Legends, I'm not sure what I'm doing here, but nonetheless, I'm happy to talk to you.
You qualified because you're old.
That's true. I didn't used to be, but I certainly am now.
Yeah, no, I'm joking on that. I appreciate you taking the time with me.
It's always a pleasure.
Yeah. The first question I always ask everybody, Gerald, is how you got started in the pipe business. And I know we're going to talk about Merfish pipe because of you are third generation. But what year did you start in the steel pipe business, and how old were you at that time?
So I was born in 1951, and I think that's when I started in the pipe business, because I was born into a family that was a family business at that time. In the 50s, we'd already been in business 30 some odd years. The business did evolve. I worked there most summers and went from slinging steel to cleaning pipe fittings to making deliveries to taking deliveries, just learning the business, really at the ground level. We had a small company. We had maybe 10, 12, 15 employees, somewhere in that range. And so I learned it back then. I remember one time I cleaned pipe fittings and I was so filthy that my mother used to leave clothes out in the washing machine area, which was in the garage, and I had to change in the garage before I was allowed to come inside. And my dad would have a piece of manila paper that he would put down in the car seat because I was not clean enough to sit in the car seat. I came back. I went to University of Texas, got a bachelor's degree, met my wife, stayed another year and got a master's in business administration, moved to Los Angeles for 2 years and went through a training program at Union Bank, then 3 years in San Antonio, and eventually became a lender, a commercial lender at 25 years old, vice president, and accomplished a lot. And then moved back in 1978 into the business. My wife was admitted to law school at the University of Houston, so we moved back to Houston. And although I have to admit, all my life, I saw myself doing that. My parents wanted me to do that, and they were really kind of not so happy about our move in Los Angeles, but it was really a great move in my career because it gave me a sense of confidence that, and I could accomplish things on my own, and I wasn't going to be just the SOB, the son of the boss. And so I recall an incident where I asked my dad if I could go to Dallas, for example, and try to call in some customers there because we're a master distributor, so we're master distributing steel pipe. And he told me, "You can, but you'll fail," And as dads and sons often do. And I didn't get angry. I went, and I was right, and he was wrong, thank goodness. And so I was able to build a business. But so that part of my career of not being in the family business directly out of school was really fortuitous because it allowed me then to question those things and have enough knowledge that I wouldn't have been able to question otherwise because I had blinders on the whole time. Yeah. So from 1978 on, so we're now in 2020. So this is my 42nd year.
Very good. Very good. Now, give me a little history, if you would, about Merfish pipe and how that all got started, and starting from the first generation.
Yeah, so I hope we have time for this, but
we got plenty of time.
Great. Okay, so my grandfather immigrated to the United States in 1913. He came from an area that I would like to call Prussia, where it moved from Russia to Poland, Russia. He didn't speak English. He only spoke Yiddish. He read Hebrew religiously. And he came across with $5, and you had to come through the border with $5. He came through Galveston, and he then sent $3 back to my grandmother and his daughter, who were still living in that area. He had been drafted in the Russian army, which was not a good place for a young Jewish man to be, and he had put his eardrum out to get out of the army. He actually punctured his eardrum. He was very lonely in 1913. His training at that time is a tailor, a Schneider. And so a lot of the merchants, the dry goods merchants in town, were Jewish, and so he was able to get some work from them.
How old was he? Approximately.
Yeah. Give me a minute to figure it out. He passed away at 69 at 85. So that means he was born in 1886. So I guess he was 29, almost 30 years old, somewhere in that range. And he wanted to go back. He was lonely. He wanted to go back, but World War I broke out, and he couldn't get back. And so by the time World War I was over, then he was able to send for my grandmother and my aunt. And they came in 1919, and then they bought the property, which was ours, which we owned for 85 years, and which we built the company based upon, near downtown Houston. And then my dad was born in 22. My father, my grandfather started in the kind of junk collecting business, and then he would sell plumbing supplies. And then he really, a lot of them were scratch and dent, and it even got to the extent where if he couldn't get scratch and dent, as the story goes, he would buy prime material, new things, and he would scratch it and dent it in the corner where you couldn't see it in the bathtub and sell that. So it was this whole concept. He was a merchant. He basically, even though he was trained as a tailor, he became a merchant. And my dad then came, and they eventually became a wholesale plumbing supply house. We were an Elger distributor and all the names that had water heaters, State Water Heater, and all these other Malibu fittings. And as it turned out, most of the plumbing supply houses in Houston had the same kind of tenure. They had grown out of junkyards, and they were almost all owned by Jewish families, because Jewish families really couldn't go out and get professional jobs. We couldn't go in the oil patch. We couldn't go in. Law firms weren't even taking Jewish lawyers. It's the way it was. And so my dad, because growing up with all of them religiously, became good friends, and we used to bring down rail cars of Wheatland pipe. And then we would distribute that, because we had a rail spur, to other smaller plumbing supply houses. And one day my dad decided, this is a lot easier business than selling plumbing supplies, because plumbing supplies, there was a lot of china then. It wasn't as much stainless steel or porcelain, but you get a lot of porcelain and china. And if it breaks or scratches, or you got the wrong color, or something happens, you're just, you've got junk. So he decided that what we should do is devote our efforts more to the Steel Pipe Master distribution. And it was about the same time when the city of Houston was taking off in growth. And in Houston, we had a pretty much bifurcated market in the sense that which you don't see like in the Northeast or other places, where the plumbing supply houses just stuck to plumbing supplies. Whereas he then crafted a business to sell to mechanical contractors for commercial construction, for chilled water systems and things of that sort. So we sat on that fence, and we were the master distributor to the plumbing supply houses, but we had this little industrial supply house. And at that point, we were a Nibco distributor and had a number of the names, valves and fittings. And then I came back in the business in 1978, and those two divisions were about the same size as far as sales were concerned. And we were at the time previously at a pretty decent sized plumbing supply house in town. So when we decided to go more, my dad decided to go more in the wholesale master distribution of pipe. We had to he chose to vacate the plumbing supply business, not only because he didn't love the business, but also because you couldn't compete with your customers. But you could then go off in the mechanical contractor supply business, and that would work. So at the time, Lone Star Steel was installing, this was back at about 1960, 59 or 60, was installing a Monisman stretcher addiction mill in Lone Star, Texas. And there was an identical mill to that was in Monterrey, Mexico. And so the people at Monisman told the people at Lone Star, why don't you go buy some of that Mexican pipe and bring it up here and sell it, and you'll call it LSS Alpha. So Alpha Steel Pipe was the mill. It's now owned by Ternium. So when the Lone Star mill became operational, they turned to the Mexicans and said, we don't really need you anymore, but they had tasted the export market. So they came to Houston and went all around And they chose my dad to be, and Merfish Pipe and Merfish Supply Company at the time, to be their mutually exclusive distributor. And they did that, interestingly, not because we had much money, because we didn't. They did that because my dad was the one that treated the Mexican export manager with the most respect. And they became like brothers. I mean, in many ways, that was the brother my dad never had. So they would travel, my parents and this man and his wife would travel. The families would get together. I mean, we had quite a wonderful relationship. And unfortunately, this man passed away very young, but I think it was in his 40s, had a cerebral hemorrhage. Probably it's TMI, too much information. But anyway, eventually that mill, which was owned by the people that owned Carta Blanca beer, the Garcesadas. And so they eventually got a large order from Pemex, the Mexican petroleum people, government controlled. And my dad was thrown out onto the market. And he began to buy from Korea and Japan and a lot of other countries. And that's how we built the business. When I came in 1978, we had about 15 employees total. And I devoted my time and effort on the wholesale on the wholesale master distribution of steel pipe. My brother-in-law and my sister were in the business. My brother-in-law was devoted to the industrial division. He eventually left the business. We eventually sold that. In 1990, we developed a particular relationship with a mill in Mexico called Tuberia Nacional, and we began to do business with them as well. In late 1994, the Viacero and the Merfishes bought Textube Company, and I went over to run that mill, and my sister took my position as president of the company of Merfish Supply. That lasted until the summer of 2000, at which time that Viacero, being the 51% partner of Textube, decided that it was their turn. Even though we had actually saved that mill from going on to being liquidated, because it was totally line pipe oriented. It was run by a very poor manager, and Armco really wanted to dispose of it. So we bought it pretty reasonably. We paid a lot more than any other buyer, but nonetheless, we ended up with something that we could create. And we had created a lot of value there over the next 5-6 years. Anyway, I left there, went back over to Merfish. Eventually then, I began to do some trading and some purchasing from overseas and began to grow our company. In 2004, 2005, we moved from our location near downtown on Washington Avenue. We had about 14.5 acres, and it was really cut up with a lot of streets. We moved to a 10.5 acre site, which the company exists at today, near the Port of Houston, which allowed us to pull out a lot of costs. And I developed a master plan to how pipe would come to us in a much more efficient, and we were able to pull out 2-3% of our costs by doing that. It was very important to keep all this pipe indoors because cosmetics play a big role in standard pipe distribution, master distribution. Particularly since we weren't selling end users, we were only selling other distributors. So the other distributor would have to get the pipe, keep it in their stock long enough to sell to the contractor who would then install it. And even at that point, it had to look really good. So anyway, that was kind of the game plan. In 2012, we sold. My sister wanted to retire. Ostensibly, my side of the family's greatest investment was in the business. It was very concentrated, and if something was happening to me, I was really kind of concerned about it. My daughters had already determined that they were each going to be professionals. One's a lawyer, one's a college professor. And so we sold the business to JP Morgan Chase One Equity Partners, who's now been the 80% owner since then. And my family continues to own 20%. My sister retired and sold all of her stock in that transaction. In 2013, we bought a company in the Northeast that was owned by a member of our NASPW Hall of Fame. He had passed on, but his son owned it, the Rao family, and it was BBL. And then in June of 2016, we were fortunate enough to purchase the pipe division of Klockner Metals, Inc. And that then gave us a presence across the U.S. We were in New Jersey from the previous acquisition, Florida, Houston, Southern California, and Northern California. So with that, we were really near the strategic ports. And then in February of 2019, Merfish Pipe Holdings purchased United Pipe and Steel, which had 13 or 14 locations themselves. United is not just a pipe distributor. They also distribute copper tubing, plastic pipe, much more domestic pipe oriented, strut, all thread rod, and conduit. So their model was more delivering small quantities to many, many distributors. We're almost at the finish merging the two companies' operations. We make over 100,000 deliveries a year, and we have over 250 employees. So it's a much bigger company, and that's kind of the story. We've just recently renamed the company Merfish United, so to express the merger of the two companies.
Gotcha.
That's a long story. I'm sorry.
That's okay. We got plenty of time, and we've got somebody who's good at editing, but that was very in depth.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Probably more than you wanted.
No, it was fantastic. Thank you very much, Gerald. We talk often about the changes that we've seen throughout technology, etc. And with the Merfish companies all the way from 1920s and on, my goodness, there's a 100-year history.
That's right.
Of that. What are some of the interesting ones in the last 40 years that you've seen? Whether it be technology or whatever.
Well, I think what's happened in our industry over the last 40 years is that technology has really played a role. It has shrunk the world, and the ability to write an email and communicate with a number of people at one time, the ability to be copied on emails so you kind of can keep abreast of what's going on without necessarily injecting yourself into that day-to-day activity has been really critical. And I think just the advent, even before the rise of emails and internet, the mere fact of being able to produce spreadsheets and worksheets that allows us to maintain analysis and get those off of an ERP, an operating system, it just allowed us to be so much more efficient with our work.
And not to mention be able to do it from anywhere. That's
right. Today, yeah, we can actually, nobody really needs to be much in the office except for the sense of camaraderie and teamwork and keeping an eye on things. So I think that's been important. As to the industry itself, obviously we have much greater import penetration than we've had. And that kind of makes sense because in the United States, we've been slow, particularly in standard pipe business, to develop new mills. The standard pipe business has always been kind of viewed as the stepchild of energy piping, and energy piping being oil country tubular goods and line pipe. Standard pipe was like, well, I don't really want to do that. It's really not important. And yet, I can tell you that there are some very good mills, but we've had a lot of contraction. I mean, there's just not that many standard pipe mills left in the United States now. What we have seen recently is consolidation on what I would call the merchant sizes, which is the sizes of, say, 2-inch and down, into Wheatland tube. And now Nucor has begun to make pipe itself. They bought a number of assets, and they've now been able to take some of the structural mills they're working with and now begin to provide hydro testing. So they're entered the market in a big way. And that's kind of the changes. I also think the technology of ERW pipe in my 40 years has really advanced. 40 years ago, and I think I have this perspective from being so active at TexTube for those 5 or 6 years. And then those 5 or 6 years, I think, gave me a real leg up on a lot of distributors because I really understand how pipe is made. And so when we ended up having a claim, I could go back to that root of all that understanding. I would sit out for hours at a time and just watch the pipe being made. And that just helped me understand the process. Any good manufacturer is constantly trying to move a bottleneck. So if you remove one bottleneck, your productivity goes up, your efficiencies go up, your yields go up, but you find the next bottleneck and you keep removing those in the process, you end up getting to as good as you can get. And that was always our goal. So ERW mills have changed. There was a lot of memory in the first ERW pipe that was done. The welding technique was not nearly as good. They were using tubes. There was no solid state. There was no ultrasound to be able to put sound waves through the weld zone to determine if there's voids. And it just didn't have a very good reputation. And in fact, I've even heard some of these old line pipe people talk about how they'd lay a long line, and if there was a rip or a void at one of the seams, it would just keep going all the way back. There wasn't that type of quality.
Right.
In today's world, it's very different. And in fact, the weld line coefficient of ERW is 1 when seamless is 1, because there is no weld line. So a well-done ERW piece of pipe is very different than it used to be. And that's even evident by the fact that oil country casing now is done in ERW pipe, tubing in ERW pipe, which 40 years ago really wasn't the case, unless you hot finished it like Lone Star did. So I think the technology of pipe making is a lot better. The better our ERP systems are, the more you can spot where not just the physical bottlenecks, but where your yield losses are. And you can fine tune that so much better. So there's been a lot of technology, and this technology in steel making has really changed from old ingot steel. Nobody makes ingot steel anymore. Nobody has to kill it and then reheat it and roll it into a slab and then roll it in a hot roll. It's continuously cast. So that has some real efficiencies. So anytime you take a point where you've got welding or liquid steel and it's open to the air, you grab impurities. They just infiltrate into that. And now with the systems we have, that doesn't exist anymore. And that's given us cleaner steels and better steel to work with. So all those technologies, gosh, a long way.
Yeah.
From operationally as a distributor through the product we're selling is very different.
Right. Yeah. The leaps forward have just been incremental over those years. Yeah.
Huge.
Well, to shift gears a little bit, I'd like to talk a little bit more on the personal side of it and ask you, was there in your personal development as in the pipe business, was there ever any defining moment that impacted your business positively, negatively, whether it be, from a family member or just a cause of business, some big impact?
So there always are, as we look through our business, our businesses go like this and then they might dip a little bit, but then there's always something that jumps you up to another level. And I think that's what you're asking for. What kind of jumped you to another level? So when I look back across the tenure, I can't go over the full 100 years, but I certainly know the last 60 or so, because I'll be 69 soon and I was aware of these things. There was a very substantial dock strike in 1964. It lasted 100 days. All the longshoremen along the Gulf Coast struck. It was very unionized.
100 days?
Yep, over 100 days. And what happened was, at the time, my dad foresaw that. And so he piled up lots and lots of pipe. And we were basically a pretty small inch distributor there. We were maybe 6 inch and below. Now we go through 36, but still not a lot of those larger sizes, but we have them available. And what happened was sure enough, the strike happened. And he couldn't anticipate the length. He just knew it was there. And he said to me one time, he said, all I gambled was interest. Because I could keep it indoors, I could keep it clean. That's all I gambled. Because at that time, there was a lot of galvanized. You keep the galvanized outdoors, but you had to keep the black pipe indoors. And in fact, there was this long strike, and he was very disciplined about only selling people that had been buying from us. We got calls from everywhere saying, I need your pipe. I need some pipe. You have it. I do, but I'm not going to sell it to you. I'm going to sell it to my customers that have been here. Next time, you're welcome to start buying from us when this is over with, and we'll be happy to sell you, and we hope that you'll remember it. Well, that really stuck in a lot of people's minds. And so we were actually able to grow our business not only in tons after that, but the mere fact that people understood that my dad was principled and he would back them up. And that those people that he did back up, they just became really dedicated customers. And I was fortunate enough to inherit many of those, and I continued to play upon that by developing relationships with them and being there whenever they needed us. One of the things that we try to do in our business is we try to approach a claim with the same vigor that we approach a sale. Now, we all know that when a piece of pipe fails and something splits, there could be a number of reasons for that. And it takes a while to get the sample and get it analyzed and figure it out. But the point is you got to keep bringing that energy. And because we do that, I think that has also kept customers. It's kind of like a point where you have a claim. It's one of those friction points. And how are you going to handle it? Is the customer going to build confidence in you or not? Or are you going to let them down? And it's all about their perception. So we really work hard on keeping that perception positive. Other things that have really been cataclysmically positive for us was our move in 2005 to our existing building. Because we went from 14 and a half acres of like 10 sites, a yard here, a yard there, a house in between, streets in between them all. The circus would come to town and it would block the railroad for 20, 40 minutes. We couldn't block the road, rather the railroad blocked the road. We couldn't get across. I mean, it just had all kind of ills. To one facility that really allows us to keep 250,000 square foot with 17 overhead cranes, allows us to keep everything indoors. So that was really a big factor, and multiple ways to load as well. Sure. So I think those things. And the other thing I would say is just staying after it every day, bringing every day that commitment to serving the customers, being fair, and giving them a whole package, not just selling on price, but selling on the whole package, reliability, inventory, going out and buying something if we were short of something, or if they wanted something we didn't stock, finding it and making sure it was on the truck. Showing up on the job site, we need to know it. Integrity, not selling their customers. We knew every one of their customers on these commercial jobs. Never sold one of them direct. They'd call us, we go, we only sell distributors. So that type of reputation just precedes you.
Sure. Was there ever a specific tough point? I mean, like something very negatively happened. I know we've all gone through those dips and valleys that we talk about. But...
Oh, well, I think that, sure there were. When we moved, it was challenging. We were moving 20,000 tons to move into our warehouse. That was a challenging time. As family members passed on, that was difficult. Transitions were difficult. I think
was your dad still active in the business when he passed?
Yes, he was. Yes, the last 2 or 3 years, he had some dementia. It was hard for him. But by then, I'd already been in the business for 27 years. So my sister and I had been running it for a good 10 or 12 years at that time. So I think, it just goes through transitions. But we also had an interesting approach, and we have a lot of longevity in our employees because people talk about a family business. And the concept of a family business really speaks to the ownership. Not being owned by a group, an absent group, but a family business. So it's usually family business is family run. But I chose to flip those two words and call it a business family as well. And so we would create the type of relationships where people became comfortable with us. People realized that we were going to make a decision that would not negatively affect them, and they were secure and their paycheck was secure. And we didn't have layoffs. We never had a cut in the workforce for probably 90 of those 100 years, maybe 95 of the 100 years. Certainly 8, 9 were very difficult, particularly late 8. What happened in late 8 that was interesting was that we had a hurricane, I think it was Hurricane Ike, that came through Houston. And that came through in the first, let me think this through, the first 2 weeks of September of 2008. And so we were basically down. We could not operate. We had no electricity. We bought a generator, and right about the time we hooked the generator up, we were down for 2 weeks, the electricity came back on. So we were operational. Excuse me. So we had some pent-up demand, and that carried us into the last 2 weeks of September and the first couple weeks of October. And so we thought, well, what's all this talk about this bubble, the housing bubble and everything? Well, in November, we figured it out when our sales were down 50%. And from there, it just seemed to deteriorate from on. So it was, that was a big one. And what we did was, we did what I think most good companies do. We just hunkered down. Now, one of the things we always did was Those years, 4, 5, and 8, 7, 8, and not to 9, were really years where demand exceeded supply. And so therefore prices were increasing across the world, domestically and offshore. And we were very disciplined. Once again, we didn't take on new customers. We told customers, sorry, we're going to make sure we have product for those that have been here. We didn't all of a sudden say, well, we could have had that lost business. Let's double our inventory. Because our philosophy always been in a commodity like this, that everything that goes up comes down. And so when the latter part of 2008 came along, we didn't have a hyper inventory. Now our integrity made us fulfill the purchase orders we had. We had some competitors that canceled orders. We didn't cancel any orders at all. We asked our vendors if they would give us some price concessions, and some of them did because they were buying hot roll at a lower price than they figured our job was. But we told them we weren't going to cancel the order, and we didn't. We took everything in. We were very methodical about managing our business, and we had our first resupply indication start in the summer of 2009. And because we didn't expand like others did, we lost money, but we had made so much in the cycling before that we came out of that cycle pretty much out of debt. And our competitors still had inventory. They didn't start buying till the fourth quarter of 9. So it showed that our strategy was the right strategy. And I don't know, I think that's what we followed in 4 or 5 as well, when we also had demand beyond supply, and we also had that huge correction. So those things, I think, are principles that we continue. We didn't try to outguess the market. We never know when it's going to fall.
Right. Yeah. If you did, you would be, on a beach in Belize somewhere.
Well, I think if any of us would have known what would happen with the stock market over the last 2 weeks, we would all sold and been in cash.
Yeah, that's true. Did you have a mentor in the maybe 2 or maybe?
Yeah, so my dad. I think when you're in business with your father and mother, my mother was tough on receivables, and she really instilled upon us that your sale wasn't complete till you collected the receivable. It doesn't matter. It's not the sale. The sale itself is not important. It's when you get that check and it cashes. That's when you've got the cycle of going from cash to purchasing something to selling a receivable to coming back to cash that you've really now accomplished, and hopefully left over from that is profit. So she was very instrumental in that, and she became in many ways the key person in the industry for credit. In other words, if you had credit at Merfish, and Ms. Merfish gave you a good rating, you probably deserve credit. And other people would just call us. They didn't need to call anybody else because they knew that she was an icon on that.
I didn't realize your mom was an active member.
Oh, yeah. In fact, she actually outlasted my dad. But my dad became ill, and my mom lived till 91. That's right. And until her 92nd year, my dad passed away when he was 83.
So your mom worked all the way up through? And
She did. They were married 56 years, and she had been doing payroll at Fort Crockett in Galveston when they met. And she came into the family business, and she worked right alongside of him. She would go home early. She was there when we came home at 3 o'clock, but she still stayed after it. And so she was. So those two other people I think about when I looked at your questions was I thought about people like a guy named Jürgen Schlade, who was a steel trader. Jürgen and I traveled the world. We helped finance Jürgen's business when he was a sole proprietor. But he taught me a lot about steel trading, how to go in and present myself to these mills. I think about the guys at Lone Star Steel. Reese Best and Byron Dunn, Steve Fowler, Bo Urich, may he rest in peace, and Rusty Fisher, because when we had a relationship with them in the early 90s. And then when we ended up buying TexTube, our relationship really grew. And they were selling our line pipe and we were selling their standard pipe. So it was a good relationship. And I think I learned a lot about pipe and pipe making, and we were able to use some of their staff. I also think about someone that I have a lot of respect for, a fellow like Bobby Kahns. There were a lot of people in our industry back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s that were not they did not feel as though integrity was part of their core principles. We had a lot of people, particularly located in the central U.S., they would put heat numbers on pipe that was prime. They would claim it prime and it was secondary. They would do all kinds of things that were really totally unethical. And I crossed someone like Bobby Kahns, and I met him and realized what a class act he was. And he's the type of fellow that I needed to befriend. And then there was, of course, some of our long-term employees. I recall Martin Ginsburg and Keith Hudgens and Andy Pearl and Cheryl Wattoon and Joe Kreger. And then there was one other fellow that, although he was a customer, in his own special way, he really taught me a lot about business. And his name was Harry Seaborn. And Harry owned a company in Dallas. He was sole proprietor. But Harry would say, now, son, what do you want to do here? And that's why he would address me. He would challenge me on things about our service to him. And I remember one time I did something that I've forever regretted. And he kind of called me on it. And I told him he was right. And I learned from it, and I told him it would never happen again, and it has never, to my knowledge, happened again. And it was a changing of a price and just playing games, and I decided then that was not the way we were going to operate. So I have a lot, and I think Harry's passed now, but I have a lot to be thankful for as you pose that question to me to allow me to think about it, how important this man, who I don't think any other pipe distributor really knows him, maybe some of the people from Texas Pipe might know him, but he really helped me a lot too. So those are the people that kind of helped guide me. And then, just looking in the mirror and doing those 180 reviews and letting people tell you what you can do to be a better supervisor for them. People are scared of that. I welcomed it. I liked it when my employees would give me feedback, because when you're the CEO, it's lonely on top. It really is. And if there's no one else to tell you and your board doesn't tell you, and I had far advanced the business knowledge of my parents, where do you get your feedback? Where do you get your feedback from the people that you're managing too? Yeah. So if you do that blindly, it's a great tool.
Yeah. Looking back, would you have ever changed, done something differently?
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Hindsight's 20/20. Here's your chance to.
So I would say my defects as a business person were that, I'll give you an example. Texas is a perfect example. I should have had the confidence to bought 100% of that company. Instead, we bought 49% of that company because it was my idea, and I hustled someone else and let them be the 51%. But even if they were the 49 and I was the 51, I'm fiscally very conservative, and I just couldn't see risking our investment at the time. We really fairly highly leveraged it, but we pulled right out of it and it became very profitable very quickly. So sometimes I think, even though I think I have confidence to walk in the door and sell something and talk in a group, sometimes I just allow my fiscal conservativeness to hold me back from doing things that I possibly could have done.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's a great answer. Yeah, it's easy to look back and, the hindsight being 20/20 and change.
Well, I would say, Randy, a lot of people might blame that on the 51% partner, and he certainly was to blame because he took advantage of us. But nonetheless, and that partner has had a number of partnerships in every single one of them ends in very expensive litigation. Yeah. But in the same respect, it was my own reticence to say, oh, I can go do that. But I was also concerned what was going to happen at Merfish, but I did end up spending all my time at TexTube turning that ship.
Yeah. If you were to give advice to a young person coming into the steel business, would you recommend it? Would you recommend the steel industry and the steel pipe distribution industry? And if so, what kind of advice would you give somebody just starting out?
So I think it's really important to match the industry someone chooses to spend their career in with what pulls their trigger, what moves them. This is not an industry where there's instant gratification. It's long-term. You work hard. You build up equity. You build up inventory. You got to finance it right. You gotta stay with whatever your formula is. We stayed with it and stayed with it and stayed with it. And it's very much management. It's building a team. It's building a team of people that are almost like you in the sense that they want security. This is a business, I think, that's often driven by security. Yes, we have these wild gyrations in OCTG. It gyrates. Their beta is much greater than the beta of line pipe, and line pipe is much greater than the standard pipe beta. That is the trough to the height, right? But to me, you just have to be someone needs to be committed to distribution, understanding that, and willing to put in the hard work it takes and not look for that instant gratification. I don't think instant gratification is common in our industry. Right. I really don't. And so that would be what I'd say. If you're into internet-based businesses, a service model that really doesn't, it's not a capital-intensive model, don't get in the pipe business. That's probably not a good place for you. But if you want a good, solid place where you can learn a lot, develop those key relationships with your vendors, and more importantly, your customers, and ride those out and have really meaningful relationships. I didn't socialize with a lot of our customers, but when they had a pipe problem, they knew who to call and where to get their straight answer. And sometimes those problems were because their contractor misused the pipe or misinstalled the pipe or did something else. It wasn't always a pipe defect. But develop your core values, develop what we're giving to the customer, you're giving to your customer success. Listen to your customer, just fill their needs, and you can have a great career in this industry. Yeah. And a long-term career. Yeah. A long-term career.
Yeah. Shifting gears again, I'd like to talk about the NASPD.
Oh, I've never heard of that organization.
Right, yeah. We both belong to the National Association of Steel Pipe Distributors, and I wanted to ask you, when did you first hear about NASPD, and when did you join? Do you remember that first convention you went to?
So in 1978, I was still a, so our association was begun in 75. So in 1977, 78, I was vice president of a bank in San Antonio, lending. And I remember getting a call one day from my father. And I was talking to him and I said, "What's up, Dad?" He said, "Well, I just got asked to be in the NASPD." I said, "Really?" He said, "Son, I never thought I'd get that." I said, "What do you mean, Dad?" He said, "Wow, Jerry Rubenstein, Texas Pipe, Pete Knowles, Gensco, those are big companies. They're really pipe distributors. I'm not sure we really belong in it." I said, "And?" He says, "But I'm going to join." And so we joined. And I think we were probably in the first 20 companies, I would guess. So I joined the company, I joined our family business in August of 78. And I don't know exactly when, but probably 1980 was probably, I would guess, the first time. That I went. Yeah. Probably 1980-ish. And of course, as you know, I've spent a lot of time doing a lot for the NASPD. I believe in it. I don't have many customers there. I don't have many vendors that show up anymore. But I love the camaraderie. I think I come and learn. I can learn about the market. I can learn what everyone else is thinking. We've had some great speakers through the years. I'm a kind of a organizational guy in the sense that I enjoy leading organizations. I've done a lot of that in the nonprofit field. And so I enjoyed helping the NASPD. And I continue, as you know, just to remain active today and try to be there for people like yourself now serving as president, and certainly fortunate we have someone with your skills. And so my goal is to continue to kind of be a resource to the NASPD as long as I can. Sure. I now teach how steel pipe is made, which I developed I would have never been able to do it if I didn't have that tenured text tube and begin to learn. And then every time we had a defect pipe claim, digging into it, trying to figure out what was the root cause. And even today, it shouldn't say even today, because life's a cycle of learning, right? And today, I even run across claims that I come to the realization of what the root cause of the defect is that I had never thought of until I figured out that particular claim. I've
had probably 20 interviews here, and nobody, the subject has not come up about the NASPD educational program. Could you touch on that a little bit? Because, you're one of the founders of that, as you had mentioned, and a presenter, if I'm not
right.
mistaken.
So when I was president of NASPD, one of the things that I thought we needed was strategic planning and long-term planning. So we began that process, and it still goes on today. At the time there was a kind of a set goal of going through this and then finishing that and then executing that plan. So one of the things that came out of that, a couple of things that have interestingly come out of that in some of our ongoing discussions has been this education course. So what does an industry do other than create an environment where people can get together to talk about common issues, but also educate? Because people come to this industry it's not like they go to college and learn about pipe technically or how to distribute it. They understand the economics of taking a product and distributing it, knowing your costs, understanding your strategy, understanding your logistics flow, all those types of things. But nobody there teaches you how much pipe you can put on a truck. Nobody teaches you how much weight, how to figure wall thicknesses, weight per foot, and all that, or how pipe product's made. And so we kind of donned it. I guess I can claim partial responsibility for it at the least. And we were able to then develop a curriculum. It took us 2 or 3 or 4 years to get a really good curriculum. I actually think I hold certificate number 1 because I went to the first class in San Diego. You did too? Because I wanted to find out what we were offering. And what I found is that we had a lot to improve upon. And so I jumped in there the next year and took on how pipe is made and then spoke to standard pipe. And I think we've evolved that into a really meaningful type of education course. Now, what's the purpose? The purpose is not to take and educate a person that's been in the industry 10 years. They're not going to get a whole lot. They'll get some new things. But if you take someone that's been in the industry 1 or 2 years and put them through that class and they really learn it and understand it and seek to then reinforce it, they come away advancing their knowledge 2 or 3 years. And so it becomes a valuable resource to the companies because they can take their relatively virgin, inexperienced salespeople, stick them in that class, and at least they come out with a lot more knowledge. They still have to deal with, are they going to come to work on time? Are they going to work hard? Are they going to make good decisions? All those types of things. But at least when we start talking about specifications, we start talking about problems, defects, old country tubular goods versus line pipe versus standard pipe versus squares and rectangular structural pipe, pipe coatings, pipe MML test reports. We're teaching them how to begin to look at those things. And they're also learning the math of pipe. Because just because you have 36-inch pipe doesn't mean, and the truckload maximum weight is 45,000 pounds, doesn't mean you can put 45,000 pounds on that truck. You probably can't unless it's heavy wall because you just weigh out. So you got to be concerned with volume out versus weight out. And then you got to figure out how to distribute your freight across the price of the pipe so that you're giving someone not, hey, here's the price FOB Houston, here's the price FOB Dallas. You're giving them, this is your price FOB Dallas, and your freight's embedded into the price. So there's lots of things to learn about in the process.
Right.
And so I think it's great. We've, I don't know how many years we've done this now, but every year we improve it a little more.
And what are the different presenters? I know we've got NA 500 squares and rects. We've got an OCTG.
Yeah, so we start. So this is kind of the agenda. We start with how steel is made, and someone from U.S. Steel comes and teaches how we get from scrap, but more importantly, how you get from iron ore all the way into steel, flat rolled steel, or other steel size products. Then I step in for an hour and 45 minutes, or 30 minutes, 45 minutes, I really don't know exactly how long, and teach how pipe is made. So you've got steel, so we continue to build on things, right? So you've got flat rolled steel, I talk about ERW, I talk about seamless steel, how seamless pipe is made from round billet. I cover a lot of things, and all the way, when I talk about it from made, I have 170 slides in my presentation and probably embedded 5 or 6 videos, because videos kind of put it all together. So my process of teaching, and I don't consider myself a great teacher, is that I first tell them in a slide, and then we take it and show them in the video, and then we show a second video that reinforces the first video. And those tend to really help people understand what goes on. You can't really take them to a mill. And then, so that I finished that, and then steps in steps in to take Oil Country Tubular Goods, which is the greatest tonnage use of the market in the United States. Someone then steps in and does line pipe, API line pipe, which is the second largest consumer of tonnage. I come in and do standard pipe, not because it's the third largest consumer, because it's not, but because that kind of covers all the hydrostatically tested prime products. So I talk about standard pipe. Standard pipe is that which is used in construction. It's plumbing, heating, air conditioning, chill water systems, fences, fire protection, structural. It's got a myriad of uses. Light industrial, not heavy industrial, because that has to do a lot with really thick pipe and the chemistry because of the temperatures that perhaps in heavy industrial. It's not in refining either. It's in flow lines. It's a lot of different usages. So that ends our first day, as I recall. And then the second day, we talk about squares and rectangular shapes, how you get from a round to a square rectangular. A500, as you mentioned, it's a structural grade. It's a non-hydrostatic structural grade. And how that gets used in the industry. Then I think the other subjects we cover are coatings, for line pipe coatings. We cover mill test reports, understanding mill test reports and how to read them. And then the math of the business is huge. So those are the things we cover. Oh, I'm sorry, the type of usage was used in secondary pipe. How is used in secondary pipe employed in distributed? Because there's a lot of that in the industry. You know, steel products, including steel pipe, is the most recycled product in the world. It really is. It far outstrips any other product that gets recycled. Steel does. And a substantial portion of the tonnages in the United States every year are made out of recycled steel. So in the U.S., we go from about 16 million tons a year to 20 million tons a year of tubular products, which is mostly driven by the oil patch, how much Oil Country Tubular Goods and line pipe gets used. Standard pipe is usually around 1.7 to 2 million tons. It's pretty steady with that unless we have a severe recession and construction goes down. Also piling. Piling gets also spoken about as the different uses. That ends the regular course. You can then sign up for a second course, which is another day, for being very specific about Oil Country Tubular Goods, learning how wells are drilled, and then what's the purpose of casing and how it sizes from a larger size on the top to smaller sizes. And with the advent of horizontal drilling, and you might go down 20,000 feet and over 20,000 feet with a horizontal lateral, and how all that works. And so that's another day of education. That's a separate course that people can take.
Sure. Thanks for touching on that. We hadn't gone over.
The other neat thing that we've created besides education is the Hall of Fame. And I kind of think maybe I was the driving force on that. So I'll take a little credit here.
Do it.
The Hall of Fame, I think, was really cool because my concept, the concept that I think we evolved was that we would have a place to honor those people that helped build our industry. Too many times people have a business and they pass on, or they get older and they stop coming around, and they're just kind of, we move on to the next thing. We're always looking forward. We look back some. Don't get me wrong, and I appreciate what you're doing because we're looking back. But you don't always often look back as far back as you look forward. I think that's a fairly valid statement. And this was a way of commemorating those people that have really been the pillars in our industry.
And the thing I like about and notice about the Hall of Fame program, if you will, that we have is that they don't necessarily have to be members of the NASPD. That's not what it's about. It's about, the steel pipe industry as a whole or as a general.
That's exactly right. That was exactly one of the really important keys was we have another award that we give to people that have really given above and beyond to the NASPD. This is an award to the industry. And we have a number of people in there that were tangentially involved with NASPD. Their companies might have been a member, they came to a few conventions, whatever. But this was really about trying to develop that. And it has really been a fairly powerful tool.
And touch on the other award, the Knowles Rubenstein Award.
Yeah, so a long time ago, the leaders at the time, I was not part of that group at all, decided that what we needed to do is those people that get involved in the SPD and remain involved and really give themselves above and beyond just their officership or their career their career. You know, everybody has a career in these nonprofits, and we're a nonprofit, the association. You start as a committee member. You then hopefully someone sees a little leadership, you become a committee chair. Hopefully somebody sees that, you join the board of directors. Hopefully somebody sees that, you become an officer. And then you climb that ladder. But the idea was that we wanted to recognize those people that even after they've climbed the ladder and become president and ex-president. I had a friend of mine always said, he didn't aspire to be president. He always wanted to be ex-president of organizations. So anyway, that once you climb that ladder, you continue to give of yourself and help the association. And you were really significantly made a change while you were president of the association. And so at the time, those people called that the Knowles Rubenstein Award, named after our two key founders, because they were the two fellows, Jerry Rubenstein and Pete Knowles, that came together and decided, you know, our industry needs an association. So that's just another great award that we give out very selectively. There are many years we have no inductees into that. Nobody gives award that. But it's a wonderful recognition to receive.
I'm glad we got that on tape. It's that way people that are hitting on our website and they see, you know, maybe that interview, they can, you know, kind of learn a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing all that. So. Well, before we wrap this up, I want to ask you, want me to grab that?
No, I really just push the off button and turn it off as far as I'm concerned. Pick it up and hang it right back up as far as I'm concerned. There we go. Just press off. There's an off button on the upper left. That's fine. That's great. Sorry.
No problem.
Almost every call we get at home is asking for money nowadays, it seems like.
And that's where the editing process will come in.
I hope so. Homer, do a good job.
Come on, Homer.
It'll hang up in just a minute.
You're up, Homer.
Sorry.
No problem. We'll let that run through its course.
Yeah, why don't you just hold here for a minute?
Sure. Why don't you look over your sheet while we do have a minute? And because
I do have something.
The last thing that I always ask everybody, Gerald, is there something I forgot to ask you, or is there something that you want to touch on? So that's always the last thing that I ask. And I've got one more question before I ask you that. And,
well, I want to go back because there was something that I think has changed. And I didn't mention it here, but that was. I think we've lost our pricing discipline.
What do you want to be specific about that, or what?
Yeah, if you want to weave this in, I sense that in today's world, there's just been more emphasis on top line sales than there really is on bottom line profitability. Mm-hmm. And there was when I came into the business, and I think it's slowly deteriorated over the years, there seemed to me to be a lot more pricing discipline. This is my price. This is what I want to sell it for. And, you might deviate 1 or 2%. Now I see people, and they're on this free fall. Well, someone else gave me this price. Well, maybe it didn't include freight. They're illogical. And that we don't have the pricing discipline in the industry like there used to be. And I think that has led to, it really makes it harder to make a profit. It really does. And to get the proper return on capital. There's a lot of capital risk in pipe distribution. We have huge capital investments in our inventories. And we're exposing ourselves to price fluctuations. And much as you are kind of in the stock market, think about the last few days in the stock market, last 2 weeks in the stock market, a decline, you can imagine what the oil country tubular goods distributors are thinking right now with oil at $33 a barrel.
When it was $53 3 weeks ago.
That's right. So you've got this big beta going on. And so we're taking so much risk there that I'm of the view that we should be paid for it. If we could resupply in a week, well, that's not much price risk, is it? Capital risk. But the truth is, none of us can do that. None of us can do that, because then if you could do that, you're not going to serve your customers well. So I've just seen a deterioration in that. And I think it's harder and harder to get the proper return on our capital. And generally because there's so much capital in the market today, it chases all these low return situations just to get any return.
Sure.
I mean, we may see the Feds drop the Fed fund rate to 0.
Yeah.
Golly.
Yeah.
Of course, that might be coronavirus focused, but we'll find out over time.
Sure.
But it's scary to me.
I understand. Well, got 2 more questions for you. Number 1, besides your career, what are you most proud of? What gives you joy, satisfaction? Something other or away from the steel pipe business?
So I have been very fortunate to be able to have the time and to set my own schedule to be able to give to the general community and my particular Jewish community. I've had positions of nonprofit officerships, presidents of larger organizations. I've really enjoyed giving of myself in that way. I think it's my obligation. I'd like to think of myself as a community servant. But in my business, has certainly been successful and joyful. But I think that which gives me the most joy is my family. And I have been married to the same woman for 47 and a half years.
Congratulations.
It's a miracle. We both think it's a miracle. We look at each other and wonder how in the hell we ever made it. But we have, and we hope that we'll continue. I have 2 incredible daughters, each of which is highly educated. Each one has 3 degrees. They are great citizens. They have a social conscience. They live financially way below their means, which I really honor them for. Our youngest has 2 daughters, each of which are being raised with the right values. That's really kind of the coup de grace. I think your family really becomes the coup de grace. Children, employees, they don't listen to what you say as much and how you do things as to what you do. And so it really is. So I see so much of ourselves, my wife and I, in them. The fact of that my wife also has been very active in lots of nonprofits, fighting for equal rights for women, fighting for equal rights for those that don't have as much of a voice as we do. I also want to pontificate a little bit here in the sense that I hear the term giving back. And I don't think that's a fair term, because I think my view is that every single human being has a responsibility to be generous. It's part of my personal covenant with God that I will be generous. Now, what giving back implies is that you don't have to be generous until you earn a lot. I think that whatever you have, you should share something. Obviously, people with lower income don't have as much to share. Those that have higher income just have the responsibility to share more. And my view is that I don't use the word giving back. And I challenge people on that too, because I just don't think that is what the scriptures teach us. Whatever your religion is, it just doesn't teach us that. It teaches us to be generous and help people. But when you make more, you have to give more. That's what I think is really what someone's trying to say. But giving back makes it conditional, and I don't think it should be conditional.
Gotcha. Very good. One last question for you, and that's...
And then you're going to give me a check?
No.
I actually think I owe you money anyway. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Last question is there anything that I forgot to ask you? We've got lots of things on the list here, but sometimes you may want to share something that maybe I forgot to ask you.
Two things,
Okay.
I would say. First is, my grandfather had a wonderful, wonderful saying. He said that money is round and it rolls away from you and it rolls back to you. But your reputation is like your skin, it sticks to you. You don't shed your skin. So guard your reputation. Don't worry about losing money sometimes. You'll make it up other times. But guard your reputation. Because once you get a bad reputation, you can't shed it. And you and I, Randy, have seen people come in and out of our industry that didn't have the right integrity. Some of them are in jail, right? Some of them paid huge fines, right? They're not in our industry anymore. And those of us, and we've seen it. So in my 42 years, and I've seen that happen to people. So whoever sees this, guard your reputation. It's what you really have. And at the end of the day, when you're put in the ground or however you choose to have your body disposed of after you passed on, that's what people will remember. They're not going to remember anything else. And the second thing is I think we have a great association. I mean, we've got great stability at the executive director's position. We really function well. Our costs, the costs of the association have been kept very reasonable. I mean, to be a member is not even $100 a month, you know, a little over $100 a month. Our 3 meetings are all very reasonable compared to any other association I've been involved with. So I'm really proud of what I think all of us have worked hard to create in the NASPD. And I think that we have a long, long runway to continue to serve the industry. It does seem to me that we're going through some transitions now because people like myself, and as you said, you see yourself retiring in the next 5 to 10 years as well. There's going to be a transition or rollover. So I'm really happy to see us have started this leadership training class because I think that really exposes people to the NASPD and it helps the member companies. And I'd like to think I played a role also in helping recognize that was necessary. I know I told Susanna enough times, Susanna, one day I'm going to retire. We got to figure out, and one day we're all going to retire. We got to figure out how to replace ourselves. Because a good leader replaces themselves. You can't just say, I did my job and go on off to the sunset. You got to replace yourself. So I'm really pleased with the association. I think we're in a really great place. We're very financially stable, which a lot of them can't say that. And I think, we just have to find ways to continue to serve members. We got to listen to members, and what they need and what they want is what we need to deliver. Yeah. So that's the final part of my message.
Very good. Well, Gerald, thank you very much, my friend.
You're welcome.
I appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thanks for spending time with me.